Hi, I'm Oscar Villalon, the managing editor of ZYZZYVA, and I am here for a conversation with Glen Gold. Glen Gold, he's the author of the best-selling novels Carter Beats the Devil and Sunnyside. His work has appeared in McSweeney's, Playboy, and the New York Times Magazine, and his recently completed memoir is tentatively titled The Last Kings of San Francisco, but that may change because I think it's still ways off from being completed. He lives in San Francisco, and his essay, The Plush Cocoon, appeared in our issue number 100. So welcome, Glen. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I just referred to your...
Recently completed and not completed?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, because the piece that ran in our 100th issue, The Plush Cocoon, is part of this larger work.
Yes.
And so let's start with that. Describe, what is this larger work about?
I have a 3-volume memoir that eventually all 3 volumes together will be called I Will Be Complete.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's 3 shorter books, each of them about 250 pages, that when all assembled will tell the story about my autonomy growing up. Sort of how you become both a person that has connections but not too deep connections, how you retain your soul while at the same time being able to relate to people.
And this is so this is your entire young life that this is going to go over?
Pretty much, yeah.
And part of that story is the one involving, I guess, your relationship with your mother. And in issue 100, you sort of, well, you get into this. We find out in this essay what your life was like as a boy in Southern California. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Living with your mother, living with your father. And even as a very young boy, you being aware of some sort of mystery, of being aware that in some way all wasn't what it appeared to be with your mother. That she is haunted, if that's not too strong a word. Can I say that?
Sure, yeah. There's one of the things that happens when you grow up is that you're so small, at first everything is about you. And my mother was kind of smart about this in that she realized that there's concentric circles that happen as you get older. And at first, being very self-centered, you wonder how everything affects you, and slowly become aware of the things around you, like your background, your family, your past, where they came from. And my father's past was very straightforward. He was just a Chicago Jew who had been a Russian Jew beforehand, and everything was pretty straightforward. But her background, as she was the first to admit, was very Gothic. She was the product of 5 generations of German and British aristocracy marrying and then having lots of disasters in the past, one after the other. And by the time that she was a young girl, her upbringing in London, near London, a small town called Uxbridge, was bombs falling on her playground and a lot of mysteries around that. She grew up in a boarding house. She grew up with an absent father. Her father was this genius intellect who spoke 7 languages, who was a German national, and he ended up spending all of World War II interred on the Isle of Man. The family mythology is that he was the last inmate released off of the Isle of Man in World War II. I actually went to Isle of Man to find out what happened to him, and he sure enough was one of the last people actually released. And it's kind of a mystery why that happened, because he was certainly not an evil guy. He really didn't have any designs against Britain. He seemed to have been kept there for other reasons, which, again, it's kind of a mystery.
So, in your previous novels, Carter Beats the Devil and Sunnyside, you did research for those. In fact, I recall reading interviews with you where you said there was sometimes the research was so fascinating you kind of forget that at some point you actually have to write a novel.
Right.
How much research have you been doing for this new work? You just said you went to the Isle of Man, but have you been? Are there letters you're going over? Are there documents, or are you relying mostly on your memory?
I'm going back right now over my old journals, which, oh my God, I don't recommend anybody ever reread their old journals. Do you have journals?
No.
Good thing. Yeah, no, don't leave documentation behind. It's like, because now the sound of my voice right now is kind of like the Peanuts adults. As I'm reading, I'm going, oh man, I'm just complaining about the wrong thing again, But it's, yeah, but it's, it is good for, as a refresher, for figuring out what was actually going on, what was on my mind at the time. So that's what I'm mostly doing right now.
One of the things I was struck by with the piece, besides the fact that it's so elegantly written, is what it suggests. And one of the things it suggests, and maybe I think of this now because I'm a parent, is thinking of your mother and the way you portray her, how sometimes it seems adults forget that even though they have, let's say, they have a small child, sometimes they're under the impression that whatever secrets or whatever damage they have in their lives, they can tamp down. And, as long as you don't talk about it, your children will never, they'll never catch on.
Right.
It's just, did you find that writing more, getting more into your story, that that was maybe the case with your parents?
I have deep empathy for my parents. And one of the challenges in growing up as a human being, I think growing up as a human being first, and then maybe writing about it second, is how to have empathy without losing yourself. And it's difficult because when you're just a baby and a child, you're still part of your parents. And then I think as a teenager, your job is to yell at your parents and tell them everything they've done wrong and how dumb they are. And I think that maybe a mark of adulthood is to realize that they're people as well. And I got off to a faster start than maybe most kids because my parents, during their divorce, they both got to live out in a way their adolescences. And so I got to see them again maybe as teenagers, even though they were in their 40s. And how they might have behaved when they were not being as scrupulous as parents. And in a way that gave me some independence, in a way that also gave me some insecurities about who's actually there for you.
Right.
And how, when do you have to actually depend on yourself? But my I think I have a second to rephrase this for a second. I ended up having a great deal of sympathy for my mom, who was not prepared for the enormous change in her life that happened. Part of the memoir that I was just reading from today is that my parents, when they married, they were middle class, and my father almost accidentally became quite rich very fast.
He created this cassette tape?
Yeah, he licensed cassette tapes from Philips in Sweden, and he reverse engineered how to make a cassette. So what happened is that it went from being reel-to-reel tapes, like the realm of almost like ham radio is how people would listen to cassettes, to listen to music. And he figured that if there were cassette tapes, it would become much more of like something to have in your living room or have in your car.
Indeed.
And so he signed up Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, and they were, that was the kind of music of my childhood. And what happened is overnight, my parents went from being middle class to being quite rich. And then immediately, almost after that, to being not rich anymore because the stock crashed. And my father's money was all in stock. And so they had quite a roller coaster. And my father realized that he liked being rich. And so,
most people do.
Most people do, but not everybody takes it to the same extent that he did. And that's why there's 3 volumes of this thing, is to sort of explain how far he went in order to try to preserve his capital. And I think my mother was also shocked because she grew up dirt poor, and she was worried that I was going to be too insulated from the world. And so she wanted to make sure that I had real experiences. And at the same time, I think also that this is something Chris Rock just said, is that success is when you have options. And my mother, at the time of the divorce, had many, many options available to her. So we were living in Corona del Mar in Southern California when I was about 10, when the divorce happened, and she moved to San Francisco, where there were nothing but options. It was the time of the human potential movement in Est, and a lot of the ideas, it's one of the things about San Francisco that I like so much is that it is the nose cone of the missile for social issues in America. That so many things start here and then spread across the country. Gay rights, beats, hippies, the human potential movement, tech, all that sort of stuff. It rises and falls in San Francisco. You know, the birth of it happens here, and often some shocking death of that movement often happens in San Francisco first before it even spreads across the country. And my mother was there in 1974, which is just the absolute peak of Werner Erhard and things like that. And there was a real pressure to find out who you were and to live up to your potential as a person. And I think that my mom got kind of overwhelmed by that whole situation.
And now you live in San Francisco.
I do.
So there must be echoes of this everywhere you go, I mean, in terms of thinking of your mother and the book and this sort of thing.
But I've lived in San Francisco on and off most of my life. I mean, I've moved out and then I've come back again. So there's a little bit of that. I mean, one thing that happens, so that the first volume of The Last Kings of San Francisco is mostly about being 11 and 12 in San Francisco. When my mom had fallen in with a really interesting social set of con men and entrepreneurs and also artists, and you know, a typical evening was going to the Washington Square Bar and Grill, and her being they were looking to do a play about San Francisco, and they wanted my mom to fund it because she now was a rich divorcee. And this ended up being a Beach Blanket Babylon. And she said no, because of course that was a ridiculous thing to invest in, a play about San Francisco. And I have memories like on every block of many different parts of my life.
How do you remember the city then as compared to now?
Can we talk about driving?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so.
Presumably you weren't driving a 11.
No, I was not driving
you were. It was a
No.
crazy time.
No, my mother didn't even let me hold the wheel back then. She was very careful. My mom had a Mercedes 300, it was this boat car, giant car, 6.3 liter engine. That was just like a tank. It was amazing. And we lived in an apartment in Pacific Heights. And I learned about driving because we moved from Southern California to Northern. So San Francisco goes like this. They have very bad drivers in San Francisco and always have. And it is because we don't like to admit we're driving. Everybody in San Francisco, it's as if they just woke up behind the wheel, they don't know how they got there, and they just need to go home, and they want you to know, whoever you are, wherever you are, they don't normally do this driving thing. Normally, they ride helium-powered unicycles, and the only reason they're driving now is because they're teaching blind children to make muffins, or something like that. You know, that's the only reason they're there. And so, they want you to know they don't want to be aggressive. And so, like when there's a green light, they slow down. They don't want to commit to a lane. You know, that's just too out there. You know, and so they'll let everybody ahead of them. You know, no matter what, ahead of them, no matter what's going on. You're ahead. No, I shouldn't take this. You know, four-way stop. You might as well get out a newspaper, you know, if there are still newspapers. Now that's normal bad driving in San Francisco. Moving back here after 30 years later, there's a second type of bad driver in San Francisco, which is fuck you. Just in one word, which is fuck you. Whatever you're doing, fuck you. If you're behind me, fuck you. I'm going to get ahead of you. And so you must have seen this in the city a million times, where there's, let's say, because of construction, because there's nothing but construction in San Francisco, everybody's supposed to merge into two lanes and not use like the left lane unless you're going to make a turn. Well, a guy will get to the very front and then try to cut ahead of everybody else because fuck you. That's it. The thing is now, the reason that's LA style driving.
Very aggressive.
Very aggressive. However, the reason it is so much worse in San Francisco is that the other bad drivers are still here. And so what happens is that all these jerks, you know, the guy in the Subaru Outback with the World Peace and Flying Spaghetti Monster stickers on the back, they will let ahead of them 47 Teslas that are cutting ahead, you know, because I didn't even know I was here, and oh yes, go ahead, you too, go ahead as well. So if you need to get across town, you'll never get there. You're doomed. Now, this is where it gets dark though, because that's as far as my brain took me until a certain point, which is this. The reason I actually think that this that the second group of people is growing and growing larger, it has to do with this incredible social inequality that's happening right now. If people are looking at this later, and there still is a world in 20 years, and they're wondering what's happening in San Francisco, we're undergoing a new social experiment. You know, this is post-beat, post-hippie, post-human potential movement, post-tech, all these different things. Right now, way beyond it being tech versus everybody else, They are taking about 4% of the population and giving them unlimited wealth, and seeing what happens in this little village that's named after St. Francis. So the idea is like, is this rather kind-hearted place where we all think we're kind of in this together, you know? It's like the square that's near here, it's not called Management Square, you know? Yet, right,
Yet.
Exactly, it's still Union Square. That is because most of us are still in this kind of la-la dreamland of we're all in this together. You know, oh, you know, socially the only way we manage to make San Francisco work is with that uneasy alliance between capital and labor. You know, as you know, the beautiful murals that we have that describe this in North Beach and stuff. It's not true anymore. It's over. And one of the reasons that we're not actually acknowledging that is that both sides, the sides that are the assholes and the sides that are the people that are just kind of old school clueless drivers, recognize something, which is that there isn't a future anymore. The future is no longer an unlimited commodity. We all know that it's getting used up. We all know, we see every day on the news with collapses of ice shelves, the end of water, this drought. We know that this can't be sustained anymore. And there's two ways you can react to that. One of them is to like unite and band up and do something, and the other is to cut ahead of other people in traffic and get the fuck where you want to go before everyone does, because there's nothing going to be left after you get there.
You know, you're describing Mad Max.
I am describing Mad Max. That's one of the other reasons why that movie was, besides everybody cutting each other off in the movie,
Right.
which, you know, I appreciated. It was...
The new one, Fury Road.
Yeah.
We're talking about. All the Mad Maxes, though,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, up to Beyond Thunderdome.
Right, yeah, we were just talking about
Mhm.
this earlier, but yeah, this is fantastic. I just saw it last night. Did you see it?
I saw it. What did you think?
I thought that it was, I enjoyed the first half of it very much, and the second half of it, as soon as I realized that it had a secret feminist subtext to it, I was delighted, because it just struck me as it was like kicking sand in Marvel Comics' eyes. As far as like the first half of the summer, the big debate was, why can't they buy things from Disney that the boys can, you know? Why can't they get their Black Widow action figures? Which I appreciate and I understand. At the same time, it's like, wow, the debate's still about capitalism. Fury Road it's this wonderful message about equality and gender studies, and I don't even have it all in my head yet. But it's I think it's a very exciting subversion of a lot of tropes.
I think that...
I'm sorry for saying the word tropes, by the way.
No, you didn't say
Subversion in the same
tropes.
sentence.
This is a literary journal. You didn't say tropes.
Yeah, but it's saying subversion
People
and
would
tropes in the
think
same sentence.
That's
It's sort of
absolutely fine.
Yeah, okay.
It's not necessarily what they expect from ZYZZYVA, but it's a literary journal, so it's totally fine.
Okay.
Yes, I think the fact that apparently so many, I say so many, I don't know how many, but apparently that men were upset on the internet about that I guess women are somehow are empowered in this movie is telling. I saw the movie. I think it's incredibly well made. I say incredibly because it's smart, it's beautiful, it works within the vocabulary of cinema in ways that most movies don't. You watch Mad Max Fury Road and you realize how many movies rely on exposition, how many movies rely on leading narrative. They don't actually let the camera tell the story.
Yeah.
This George Miller at 70 does this. He's obviously has mastery over his medium. It's all these things, and it's intelligent. It absolutely comes in there and starts talking about a world that's heinous and awful. And part of that reason why this world is so heinous and awful is because women are still treated as things. Women are still treated as objects, and that to suggest, as the movie does, which it suggests so well, that until we stop treating each other like, well, that there's no future, so therefore exploit each other, use each other, do whatever you have to do to get ahead, we're not going to have a place, a civilization.
But actually, that's interesting. Everybody's a commodity in there. Max is a blood bag.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually thought
Absolutely.
about that.
Everything there has a value in terms of what does it mean for the top guy, and it's a guy, what's going to make his life comfortable.
So I live on Telegraph Hill right now, and one of the problems with being a historical novelist is that I make shit up after a while, so I would encourage anybody to actually double check this work to make sure I'm not just
Okay.
embellishing a little bit here. But I've noticed about on Telegraph Hill is that they're constantly having to reshore up the hill because it's not natural. Originally the hill was much larger, but all the bedrock and granite and gravel that was up there. They used it to fill in downtown and fill in the marina. And the way they did that was with dynamiting. There were a couple of brothers who ran, the Gray brothers, who they would dynamite and they would just fill in, and it was incredibly profitable. So they ran out of space to dynamite in. And what they ended up doing was they started dynamiting under people's houses. And the people called the cops, but of course these guys had paid the cops off. And so the dynamiting continued until a vigilante committee killed one of the brothers. And then the dynamiting stopped. I love San Francisco history. I'm also just very interested in how we use resources around here, and also what stops people from using resources.
This is a great question. This is the sort of thing that, and dang it, I promised myself I wouldn't bring it up. But seriously, this is the type of stuff that Robert Caro.
Oh!
Yes, I
yeah,
know.
okay,
I'm sorry.
I knew it.
I'm sorry.
How many minutes did we make it before Robert Caro came? We did pretty well.
I think we did pretty well. But Robert Caro, just in terms that a lot of these things happen because of policy. A lot of these things because someone makes a decision.
Yeah.
Decisions either based because what's beneficial for someone, or decisions that are made out of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can. I'm sure the records are there. I'm sure if you wanted to, and if you're willing to sacrifice years of your life, you could get to that narrative. You could find it and discover exactly how these things
I could probably find it 5 minutes downstairs in the library here.
At the Mechanics Institute, absolutely. I think if you go down to the basement, it's like the warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, I think so.
It's shelved there somewhere in a crate.
Well, I'm very fond of San Francisco, which is why I set my books here frequently, is because it really is, before the word incubator got used in many other ways, it has been an incubator for social ideas for years and years and years. And it is interesting to me that right now the idea that we seem to be sitting on is that we're at the end of some piece of history and we're not going to do anything to get out of it. And I kind of worry about that idea sort of spreading around the country and the world once we're done with it. And it's funny because wherever I go right now, and this is like a place and a time that's very specific, I think, I overhear conversations all the time about two things: how much people's places cost, and what's going to stop it. What's the turning point that we're going to get out of this particular bubble? Because it's much worse than it's ever been before. And everybody comes to the first thing first. So 20 years ago, I was at Japan Bowl, and I was about to come bowling with some friends, and they said, you got to wait for it because it's going to be league night. Let's see, it's 7 o'clock. Okay, can you be done by 7:30? Because league night is at 7:30. All right. So we start bowling, and around 7:25, the first guy comes in for league night, and he's got a black leather cap and a mustache, and he's wearing no shirt, and he's wearing chaps, and he's got a bag, bowling bag. Next guy comes in with a leather cap, mustache, like a one of those harness and like chaps, bowling bag. Next guy comes in, leather cap, mustache, a leather jacket, no shirt, chaps, bowling bag, and then start talking to each other. They're signing. They are the League of Death Leather Daddies. So one of the things I love about San Francisco is that if you deaf leather daddy bowler, if you were two of those three things in any other city in America, you'd be kind of lonely. In San Francisco, not only is there league night for all three, if you were only like gay and deaf and a bowler, not a leather daddy, no, that's Wednesday night.
Yeah.
That's a different night entirely. It's different now. It's different here. We're not getting that exactly. And I don't know exactly how it is different, but I believe that everybody I hear out in the street is saying they're waiting for the next good 7-point earthquake to come along and shake all the amateurs out. And I don't know that we're actually going to have that kind of apocalypse on the other side. But we are, as a people here, are longing for something huge to happen to come and shake everything up, because we're not ready to take responsibility for ourselves and actually make it happen. Not an earthquake, but just a social earthquake. And I'm just as bad as anybody else. I'm just sitting here rereading my old journals and wishing for better times.
Well, there you have it. I think we should end it on that cheery note.
Okay.
But I completely agree. I hear what you're saying. I think absolutely that is the question.
I probably should have done a better job of selling my memoir, but it's going to be a couple of years before I'm done with it.
I
so.
think that's fine. Well, we can come back and revisit it then. We'll definitely, and I'm sure. And by the way, we will be featuring more of Glen's work later this year in the fall or winter issue. Lovely story you sent us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.
Well, Glen David Gold, thank you for coming in
Thank you very
and
much.
speaking to us. I am Oscar Villalon, the managing editor of ZYZZYVA, and thank you for checking us out.